"Don't move," Ethan whispered to the shadow of a life he barely understood. The air was thick with the tang of ionized metal and the hiss of cooling machinery as he stepped carefully over the fractured floor of the research outpost, eyes darting between smoldering panels and scattered tools. Lyra Vera lay crumpled against a wall, her shimmering skin catching fractured beams of red plasma that lanced through the smoke like molten threads. Ethan knelt beside her, hands hovering for a moment as if the act of touch could decide fate, then carefully lifted the debris pinching her arm. Her luminous eyes flickered open, wide and unblinking, reflecting a galaxy he had only glimpsed in textbooks, a beauty both alien and commanding. He checked her breathing, a fragile rhythm barely audible over the hum of failing generators, and then searched his pack for the medkit he carried for emergencies he had never imagined would involve beings from another world. The room pulsed with light from ruptured conduits, casting long, jagged shadows across his face, highlighting the tension in his jaw and the steady determination in his gaze. Lyra's hand twitched, small movements that betrayed awareness yet no threat, and Ethan adjusted his grip, careful, precise, every action measured by respect rather than fear. Outside, the wind of the plasma storm rattled the walls and threw loose shards of metal against the scorched ground, a reminder that time was slipping and danger was never far away. He spoke softly, not expecting an answer. "You're not alone." The words barely audible, but carrying a weight that seemed to settle the air between them. Lyra's gaze shifted from wary to curious, an unspoken understanding blooming in the tension, a delicate acknowledgement that the strange white human before her had chosen action over indifference. Ethan's hands moved over the alien physiology with steady care, applying patches and supportive wraps, improvising with what Earth-made tools he had at hand, every movement a silent promise that her life mattered. The room around them seemed to shrink, focus narrowing to the rhythm of breaths, the soft hiss of machinery, the faint crackle of plasma in the distance, and the unspoken dialogue that passed through touch and eye contact rather than words. Lyra's eyes lingered on him longer, flickers of emotion crossing her face, fear, confusion, and perhaps a hesitant trust, while Ethan worked in quiet efficiency, aware that nothing heroic required proclamation, only consistency. Sparks from exposed circuits reflected off her in dazzling patterns, momentarily making the shadows dance like constellations in miniature, and Ethan felt the weight of choice, the rare clarity that comes when a person acts purely on instinctive care. The storm outside intensified, a crescendo of sound and light that seemed to press in on them both. Yet within that chaos, the small cocoon of action and attention held them suspended, a fragile world created by deliberate, human kindness. He adjusted a fractured limb support and stepped back slightly, letting her move without interference, watching as she tested strength she had almost lost, the shimmer of her alien essence reaffirming both fragility and resilience. Their eyes met again, a silent pact forming in the charged air, the recognition that survival was now intertwined, that one human choice had shifted the balance in ways neither fully understood, and for the first time, the vastness of the universe outside felt less like a threat and more like a stage set for improbable connections. The air settled into an uneasy quiet as Ethan guided Lyra out of the debris-strewn chamber and onto a narrow ledge overlooking the jagged cliffs of the alien landscape, the plasma storm casting streaks of orange and violet light across the horizon. Each step was careful, measured, as he offered a steadying hand, and she accepted it with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity, her luminous eyes tracking every motion with intensity. He spoke softly, his voice a tether in the chaos. "We need to keep moving until we find shelter," and she nodded, her gaze drifting to the distant silhouette of a partially intact research dome, its walls glowing faintly beneath the storm. As they navigated the uneven terrain, Lyra shifted, revealing subtle nuances of movement, an elegance in the way she balanced against the wind, and Ethan could not help but notice the contrast between her alien form and the human determination that drove him forward. Small details caught his attention, the way dust clung to her skin in delicate patterns, the faint hum of energy radiating from her core, the way her gaze lingered on the flickering lights of damaged satellites orbiting overhead, and he realized the moment demanded focus rather than speculation. The storm intensified, sending waves of charged particles streaking across the sky, creating a symphony of sound that filled the air with tension and anticipation. Yet amidst it all, a fragile understanding grew between them. Lyra moved closer when a gust threatened balance, and Ethan felt the weight of silent trust settling between human and alien, an unspoken acknowledgement of shared vulnerability. They reached the edge of the dome, and Ethan surveyed the interior, noting areas of shelter, remnants of equipment, and the faintest signs of life, planning their next move with precision. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of ozone and heated metal, shadows playing across Lyra's form as she stepped forward cautiously, testing the space, and he followed, keeping just enough distance to allow her autonomy while maintaining a guiding presence. A faint vibration underfoot reminded them both that the storm was far from spent, and yet, in the shelter of the dome, they found a momentary stillness, a pause where communication transcended words, where a look, a gesture, or a subtle change in stance conveyed empathy, strategy, and acknowledgement of the trials to come. Lyra tilted her head, observing Ethan as he set up a makeshift support for her injured limb, and he responded with quiet reassurance, actions deliberate and unhurried, each movement a statement of commitment, reliability, and respect. Outside, the plasma storm raged on, a reminder that the world beyond was unpredictable, relentless, and unforgiving. But inside this small pocket of calm, a rhythm of cooperation emerged, a dance of human ingenuity and alien grace, and both recognized the nascent bond forming under extraordinary circumstances. Every glance carried information, every measured motion reinforced trust, and as they settled into the temporary shelter, Ethan understood that saving a life was only the first step, that understanding, patience, and presence would shape the journey ahead, while Lyra's luminous eyes reflected the storm beyond, hinting at depths yet unexplored, mysteries waiting to be revealed, and the potential for an alliance forged in the quiet intensity of shared survival. The storm outside had subsided into a distant roar, leaving a quiet hum of residual energy that vibrated through the floor of the shelter, and Ethan moved slowly, deliberately, adjusting the makeshift supports he had rigged for Lyra, his hands steady, his mind focused. She observed him in silence, the glow from her skin softening in the dim light, reflections dancing across scattered equipment and broken panels. Ethan's voice broke the quiet, calm and even. "We need to understand what is safe and what is not before we move again," and she inclined her head, absorbing the words and the tone, realizing that human logic was precise yet patient, a sharp contrast to the chaotic energy that surrounded them. He handed her a small device that projected a gentle, steady beam of light to analyze the floor for stability, demonstrating trust without command, and Lyra's fingers hovered over it, tentative, then confident, her luminous eyes tracking the patterns of energy and shadow, following his movements with careful attention. The space between them felt charged, not with fear, but with the intensity of connection born from necessity and respect. Every movement carried meaning, every glance conveyed intent, and unspoken communication threaded the moments together. Ethan paused to survey the shelter, noting pockets of warmth, areas that offered minimal cover, and how the remaining plasma residue could be navigated safely, while Lyra mirrored his actions, learning quickly, adapting to human methods with her alien grace, creating an unspoken rhythm. The faint sound of distant machinery reverberated through the walls, a reminder that the world outside remained unpredictable, but within this controlled space, they moved in tandem, cautiously mapping their path forward, testing trust, and solidifying understanding. Lyra finally spoke, her voice low, careful. "You see details I would have overlooked," and Ethan nodded, a slight smile forming, signaling acknowledgement and encouragement, the simplest form of human connection. They experimented with small adjustments, positioning themselves to maximize coverage, stability, and efficiency, all in silence, relying on gestures, glances, and timing, the communication seamless and intimate in its intensity. Outside, the fading plasma light painted the walls with long streaks, shadows stretching and bending, but inside, their focus narrowed, each aware of the other, every small achievement building confidence, and the sense of partnership strengthened with each measured action. As the minutes passed, Ethan and Lyra began to move with coordinated purpose, advancing through the shelter while testing their environment, their movements fluid, synchronized, and deliberate, a subtle dance of mutual respect and shared understanding, and in that moment, the vastness of the universe beyond the walls seemed less overwhelming, the bond between human and alien stronger, a testament to patience, care, and the quiet power of attention that spoke louder than any words could. The storm had calmed into a distant shimmer of charged particles dancing across the sky, casting a surreal glow over the jagged landscape, and Ethan guided Lyra through the uneven terrain with careful precision, each step measured to avoid triggering hidden hazards beneath the fractured surface. The air was thick with the metallic scent of ionized energy, and small sparks from damaged equipment flickered in the twilight, reflecting across Lyra's iridescent skin in shifting patterns of color and light. Ethan's hands moved with steady assurance, adjusting the protective gear he had fashioned from scraps, while Lyra observed intently, her luminous eyes tracking each movement, the corners of her features relaxing in silent acknowledgement of his care. The distant hum of residual plasma currents created a low, vibrating resonance underfoot, a reminder of the volatile environment beyond the dome, yet within their immediate surroundings, a fragile calm prevailed. Ethan paused to study the fractured landscape ahead, pointing out potential safe paths and subtle markers of stability in a language of gestures and concise words, and Lyra mirrored his motions, absorbing not only the instructions but the methodical logic that underpinned them. Shadows stretched across the terrain as the plasma shimmer painted long streaks of color, and the interplay of light and dark revealed textures and crevices that required delicate navigation. Lyra stepped forward tentatively, then with growing confidence, her movements echoing the rhythm Ethan had established, their coordination seamless, the quiet cooperation forming a rhythm that was both efficient and reassuring. Ethan adjusted a small sensor to detect fluctuations in residual energy, and Lyra watched, fascinated by the human tendency to analyze and adapt, a process that mirrored her own instinctive awareness yet differed in execution, creating a bridge between alien intuition and human method. The shelter behind them offered occasional relief from the open expanse, and within these pockets of stability, they paused to recalibrate and observe, each taking subtle measures to ensure the other's well-being, the bond between them deepening in ways that transcended spoken language. As the last light of the distant storm faded, Lyra extended a hand to steady Ethan when a loose fragment shifted beneath his foot, an acknowledgement of the mutual reliance that had quietly formed, and Ethan met her gaze with a nod, communicating trust and appreciation without uttering a single word. The landscape remained unpredictable and vast, yet within the delicate choreography of movement and observation, they created a shared rhythm that balanced caution with curiosity, awareness with initiative, and in that interplay, a sense of possibility emerged, a promise that the journey ahead, no matter how uncertain, would be faced together with vigilance, empathy, and the quiet power of human resolve meeting alien perception. Lyra paused at the edge of a shallow ravine, the faint glow of distant plasma streaking the horizon, and Ethan moved beside her, steadying her with a gentle hand on her back, the warmth of his presence a subtle reassurance against the alien chill in the air. The ground beneath them was uneven, small fragments of metallic debris catching the residual light and throwing intricate shadows that danced across their path, yet they moved with deliberate care, each step a negotiation between caution and necessity. Ethan gestured to a narrow ledge that led to a cluster of natural formations offering partial shelter, and Lyra followed his lead, her movements careful, observing every shift in weight, every adjustment of balance, her luminous eyes flickering with curiosity and a quiet respect for the methodical human beside her. The wind whispered through jagged rocks, carrying the faint hum of residual energy and the distant echo of the storm that had passed, a reminder that the environment remained unpredictable and unforgiving. Ethan adjusted a small portable scanner, its soft glow illuminating the immediate terrain, and Lyra watched as he traced potential hazards and safe points, her head tilting slightly as she absorbed the logic and precision behind his actions. Their steps became synchronized, an unspoken rhythm developing between human and alien, each aware of the other's tendencies, strengths, and limitations, moving in a silent dialogue of gestures and measured glances. The atmosphere within the sheltering formations offered pockets of calm, a reprieve from the sweeping vistas outside, and within this temporary haven, they took a brief moment to assess, reposition, and recalibrate their approach. Ethan pointed to subtle variations in the surface ahead, the faint shimmer of unstable metal embedded in stone, and Lyra nodded, following his lead, adjusting her stance and movements accordingly. Shadows cast by the remaining plasma light created patterns across the rocks and their forms, highlighting contours and subtle motions that might otherwise have gone unnoticed, and in this interplay of light and shape, both recognized the growing mutual awareness and reliance that had quietly emerged. Ethan's voice broke the quiet with calm observation. "We will need to move carefully when we reach the next plateau," and Lyra responded with a slight inclination of her head, her expression reflecting understanding rather than question, a silent acknowledgement of the guidance being offered. The journey ahead remained uncertain, filled with potential hazards and unknowns, yet the cadence of movement and observation they had established allowed them to navigate with confidence, a partnership built on attention, respect, and the deliberate cultivation of trust. The faint hum of distant energy currents filled the air as they advanced slowly but purposefully, every careful footfall reinforcing the unspoken agreement between them. And as they reached a more secure vantage point, Lyra's luminous form caught the fading light in patterns that shimmered like starlight, and Ethan observed her with quiet appreciation, recognizing that every action, every measured decision, had strengthened not only their safety, but also the fragile bridge of understanding, forming between human and alien. The faint glow of the settling plasma storm illuminated the jagged terrain as Ethan and Lyra moved cautiously toward a natural alcove that promised shelter from the lingering electrical winds, each step deliberate, measured against the uneven rocks and scattered fragments of metal that caught and refracted the residual light. Ethan adjusted the small sensor strapped to his wrist, its soft hum providing a steady rhythm, and Lyra observed, tracing the faint readings with her fingers, absorbing the methodical human approach to understanding the environment. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and heated metal, and every gust of wind carried a subtle vibration that resonated through the soles of their boots, a constant reminder that the world outside remained unpredictable. Lyra tilted her head, watching Ethan test the stability of a narrow ledge, then mirrored his careful steps, her luminous eyes reflecting both the lingering plasma and her growing trust in his guidance. Shadows stretched and danced across the rocks as light from distant energy arcs flickered intermittently, highlighting the contours of their forms and casting subtle patterns that shifted with every movement. Ethan spoke softly, breaking the quiet tension. "We can pause here for a moment, assess the next path," and Lyra inclined her head, acknowledging the suggestion without hesitation, her posture relaxed yet attentive. They surveyed the alcove, noting areas that offered cover, pockets of stability, and potential hazards, and every gesture Ethan made, pointing, demonstrating, adjusting, was mirrored by Lyra with careful precision, the communication between them developing a rhythm that required no words. The subtle sounds of shifting rocks, the distant hum of residual plasma, and the faint echo of energy in the air created a backdrop of constant awareness. Yet within that framework, a quiet cooperation flourished. Lyra shifted slightly closer when Ethan reached for a fragile outcropping, their movements synchronized, a silent understanding of shared space and mutual protection forming naturally in the absence of spoken commands. Light reflected off fragments of metal embedded in the rocks, casting brief glimmers across Lyra's skin, and Ethan noted these subtle cues, guiding both of them through the terrain with careful observation, patience, and an unwavering focus on safety. Every footfall, every glance, every gesture reinforced a bond that had quietly developed over the course of their journey, a blend of human attentiveness and alien perception that allowed them to navigate the precarious environment with confidence. The alcove offered a temporary pause, a space to catch breath, observe, and adjust, and within that stillness, both recognized the unspoken trust that had formed, a partnership grounded in awareness, empathy, and the steady rhythm of deliberate action. The distant storm clouds, still faintly aglow with residual energy, reminded them of the larger world beyond. But for the moment, the focus remained narrow, centered on the coordination of steps, the subtle exchange of knowledge and movement, and the quiet reassurance that each was capable of protecting and guiding the other through the uncertainty that lay ahead. The wind had shifted, carrying a faint scent of ozone and distant ionized currents as Ethan and Lyra approached the crest of a narrow ridge that offered a precarious but clear view of the surrounding terrain, each step deliberate, measured, and in sync with the subtle rhythm of the ground beneath them. Ethan paused, adjusting the straps of his pack, and signaled to Lyra to do the same, his eyes scanning the horizon where the remnants of the plasma storm cast fleeting arcs of light across jagged rock formations. Lyra's luminous gaze followed his movements, her expression a mixture of curiosity and restrained caution, as if weighing the next step against the potential dangers hidden in the landscape. The path ahead required careful negotiation over uneven surfaces and fragile outcroppings, and Ethan moved first, demonstrating stability and encouraging Lyra with a quiet nod that she mirrored, placing her foot precisely where he had, her movements blending alien grace with human timing. Small shifts in the rocks beneath them produced faint echoes, yet they continued, their awareness heightened, communicating in gestures, glances, and subtle adjustments that conveyed instructions and reassurance without words. Ethan extended a hand to Lyra when a narrow section threatened balance, and she grasped it with quiet trust, her fingers luminous in the dim glow, the contact brief but grounding, a reinforcement of the silent bond forming between them. The ridge opened onto a wider plateau, the remnants of old research structures scattered across the surface, partially intact and illuminated by streaks of fading plasma light, offering both obstacles and points of reference as they moved. Ethan scanned the area with a small sensor, noting patterns in the terrain, subtle variations in stability, and potential points of shelter, while Lyra observed, learning to anticipate shifts and adjustments in real time, her movements becoming increasingly confident and coordinated with his. The air carried a low hum of residual energy, a reminder of the unpredictability of the environment, and yet within this shared focus, the tension between uncertainty and careful progression created a unique cadence that both relied upon. Shadows stretched and shifted with the fading light, revealing textures and contours that demanded attention, and each observation was met with a deliberate response, a subtle repositioning, or a guiding gesture that reinforced their unspoken partnership. Ethan spoke softly, noting a safe path forward, and Lyra nodded, the movement small but significant, signaling understanding and trust. The plateau offered a temporary reprieve, a place to pause, observe, and recalibrate. Yet even in the stillness, their senses remained attuned to the environment and to each other, every glance and movement reinforcing a fragile, emerging bond built on mutual reliance, awareness, and the quiet power of human care meeting alien perception in a landscape that demanded vigilance, focus, and unwavering attention. The plateau stretched ahead, bathed in the dim, residual glow of fading plasma, and Ethan and Lyra moved cautiously, every footfall deliberate, each step an exercise in careful coordination as they navigated the uneven, jagged surface. The air was thick with charged particles, carrying a subtle hum that vibrated through the soles of their boots and seemed to resonate with the rhythm of their synchronized movement. Ethan adjusted the small sensor on his wrist, its soft pulse illuminating patches of unstable terrain, while Lyra watched, her luminous eyes reflecting the faint flickers of light and shifting shadows across the plateau. The distant echoes of the storm reminded them that the environment was far from forgiving, yet within this moment of heightened awareness, a profound trust had formed, carried silently in every gesture and glance. Ethan extended a hand toward a particularly uneven section of the ridge, and Lyra mirrored the movement with precise timing, her body flowing with an elegance that balanced his careful deliberation. As they reached a cluster of partially intact structures, remnants of research equipment scattered around like abstract sculptures, Ethan moved to inspect their stability while Lyra observed, the patterns of energy emanating from the metal surfaces reflecting softly across her form. Their coordination was seamless, a quiet choreography of observation, movement, and reaction, each aware not only of the environment but of the other, reading microexpressions, subtle shifts in stance, and the slightest changes in energy that indicated potential hazards. Ethan spoke in a measured voice, suggesting a route through the maze of structures, and Lyra inclined her head, her attention sharp, her movements echoing his guidance as she adapted instinctively to the directions implied rather than spoken. The fading light cast long, fractured shadows across the ground, making the contours of the terrain both clearer and more mysterious. And in this interplay of light and form, both Ethan and Lyra relied on a combination of perception, timing, and the quiet bond that had grown between them. The environment demanded focus and patience, and they moved as one, the synchronization of human determination and alien grace creating a rhythm that carried them safely across unstable ground. Lyra stepped lightly over a narrow fissure, guided by Ethan's subtle indication of balance and weight distribution, and he observed her with a calm attentiveness, noting the way she adapted without hesitation. Small vibrations from residual energy flows shifted the shadows slightly, drawing their attention to delicate adjustments in footing and positioning, and every interaction reinforced the fragile trust that had become their silent language. As they paused to survey the next stretch of the plateau, Ethan's eyes met Lyra's, a quiet acknowledgement passing between them, signaling the culmination of cautious progress, the recognition of mutual reliance, and the unspoken understanding that the path forward, while uncertain, would be faced together with attentiveness, respect, and the subtle power of human care meeting alien perception in a world that demanded both. The horizon stretched endlessly, a tapestry of fading plasma light and distant swirling energy currents painting the sky with streaks of violet and amber, and Ethan and Lyra stood at the edge of the plateau, their forms silhouetted against the vast expanse. Ethan adjusted his pack, the weight familiar and grounding, and Lyra shifted, her luminous skin catching the last glimmers of light, reflections dancing like constellations across her contours. The air was still, carrying only the soft hum of residual energy. And in that quiet, both felt the culmination of their journey, the careful steps, shared attention, and growing trust condensed into this singular moment. Ethan extended a hand, not as a guide, but as a gesture of acknowledgement, and Lyra accepted it, their fingers brushing lightly, an unspoken affirmation of the partnership that had quietly formed. Shadows from the distant terrain stretched across the plateau, highlighting textures, fractures, and subtle variations in elevation, each detail observed and accounted for by the human mind and mirrored by the alien perception, creating a seamless awareness of their surroundings. The subtle interplay of light and reflection revealed glimpses of distant structures, ancient and eroded, that hinted at stories of the planet long before their arrival, and both paused to take in the scale and magnitude of the environment, realizing how small yet significant their presence had become. Ethan spoke softly, his voice carrying a calm certainty. "We made it this far," and Lyra inclined her head, the faintest hint of a smile crossing her features, a reflection of understanding, gratitude, and the recognition of care that had sustained her. Every glance exchanged between them held the weight of shared experience, a silent communication of respect, endurance, and the acknowledgement that the choices of one human had influenced the survival of an alien being in ways neither could fully quantify. The plateau offered a vantage point over valleys carved by unknown forces, rivers of energy flowing like veins through the land, and the soft shimmer of plasma reflected in Lyra's eyes as she absorbed the magnitude of the view, the vastness and beauty of the world striking in contrast to the fragility of their journey. Ethan observed her quietly, noting the blend of strength, resilience, and curiosity in her posture, a living testament to the bond forged through careful observation, patient guidance, and mutual reliance. The gentle breeze carried distant echoes, whispers of energy and movement, while light from fading arcs cast patterns across the rocks, shifting and changing. Yet within this dynamic environment, both found a stillness, a momentary pause where understanding and empathy resonated more profoundly than words. As they stood side by side, surveying the horizon and the path they had traversed, the faint glow of the universe reflected in Lyra's eyes seemed almost human for a fleeting instant, a mirror of hope, trust, and recognition. And in that silent acknowledgement, the enduring impact of human care and presence became clear, leaving the promise of continuation, exploration, and connection lingering beyond the edge of sight.